here, y'all. I mean, if you're looking at the suspension of when Arman Tsarukyan would be ready to go ahead and get back into the cage, it would be January 12th, 2025. I believe the UFC is possibly looking to make their pay-per-view return sometime during that date. So I think, honestly, we may be seeing that Arman Tsarukyan and Islam Makhachev rematch. And then another name that I really, really think the UFC will possibly try to push on that California card is Raul Rosas Jr., because he's someone that formerly from Northern California, but also on top of that has a lot of roots over there in the state. I mean, I think that is another one of those guys that you can go ahead and throw on that card. You also have Umar Nurmagomedov, possibly can throw him in the co-main event against the likes of Merab Dvalishvili, but that is still to be seen. We obviously do not have a set in stone plan yet of when the UFC will be making their return into California, but I think that if it does happen, it will be obviously at the Anaheim Center. They just recently inked that deal with the Anaheim Center to be having the WWE events and the UFC events over there. So I think that the return will be to the Anaheim Center. I think it will be in January, and I'd probably say about mid-January, maybe the end of January, they're going to have that pay-per-view. And I think we'll be seeing the UFC return with American Kickboxing Academy's own, California's own product over there in Islam Makhachev. I know he takes off to Dagestan to go ahead and do some of his training over there, but most of his training I know does come over there in San Jose at American Kickboxing Academy. Arman Tsarukyan trains over there at KDMMA in the Los Angeles, Orange County area. So I think that's a possibility that we see that lineup and we see those guys make a return on that card. And another name that I possibly want to see on that card is Anthony Hernandez. I mean, he was able to fight over there UFC 298 earlier this year in February. Had a really, really strong showing in front of a home California crowd. I think you possibly bring it back over there. I mean, if you're not going to be making the trip over to Sacramento or to the Chase Center anytime soon, then I think a really, really interesting and intriguing kind of place that you can go, if not Anaheim Center, Sacramento, man, because they got tons of Team Alpha Male guys over there. You could build a main event off Song Yadong now. Like, that's somebody that you can make a UFC Fight Night main event. He's been a UFC Fight Night main event against Corey Sandhagen in the past. So possibility of UFC kind of making that return over there to California, but I think that it will be coming January, Anaheim. I know that's kind of been a rumored date, but I think that that will be what we see coming in the future. And it's just so funny to me that Arman Tsarukyan got that suspension kind of for the whole bullying fiasco. And now, I mean, possibly it helped him lead into a kind of home turf championship matchup, because he's going to be over there, I like how I stated, from the LA OC kind of area where he does get some training in. I know he's kind of another one of those guys, like how I said, along with the likes of Islam Makhachev, that is very much where they travel a lot to go train. You know, I know that actually Arman went to Dagestan as well. So it'd be very interesting to see that matchup play out. And I think Arman gave Islam the most trouble in terms of the matchups he had coming up into the championship stage. I know we've seen Dustin Poirier have a really strong performance against Islam, but I think that Arman, Islam, 2 main events, January 2025, UFC 311, I believe that would be. It's going to go ahead and be in Anaheim there, folks. I have a strong feeling about that. It's just my feeling, man. I really do think that the UFC will be making that return come January. We now look to take it into the Dana White Contender Series, because let me just say, there were some stars on that show, and I truly think that this upcoming season, or this past season, season 8, really did produce some fiery talent. I mean, you already have Loner Kavanaugh over there going and making his UFC debut in Macau, China, I believe a little bit later this year. And then you had Cody Haddon, who recently made his UFC debut against Dan Argueta. I mean, there was just some absolute killers in this year's season. Like, let's just go ahead and take a look at week 1. Week 1 definitely had some killers on it as well. And I think that's oftentimes one of the kind of weeks that gets forgotten about the most, is because they're right in the beginning of the season. But, I mean, Loner Kavanaugh facing off against Antoine Ho. Antoine Ho, though, someone I want to see back on Dana White Contender Series. He had a very tough matchup in Loner Kavanaugh. And I think that possibly could be one of those guys that you see make that return, especially in a division like flyweight, where there is not really too much of a talent pool in terms of guys that are right about ready to get to the UFC. I think Antoine Ho, he gets a couple more fights in on the regional scene, gets to that Dana White Contender Series stage, and I think we may possibly be seeing him get a UFC contract come 2025. Jose Delgado, like I stated, got that win earlier in the broadcast against Ernie Juarez. Ernie Juarez, another one of those names that I think possibly could make that return onto Dana White Contender Series. Dana White really, really liked his performance on that show, so I think that that's possibly another name that we'll be looking to see next year. We now look to take it into another one of the weeks that I really like, Cavalcanti and Co. Seiyun Ko had a very, very solid performance against Eagle. I think a lot of people counted him out in this one, and like Dana White had said it a little bit earlier in the broadcast for the press conference for the Dana White Contender Series Week 10. He said, hey man, like a lot of these odds are absolutely insane, you know, and I truly agree with them, because sometimes he's got some of these contenders at like plus 150, plus 200 odds, and just you never know with the caliber of talent that is coming into this show who's going to be able to pull out the win. And I think that is no better stated than Eunice Dubin's win earlier this year over Shannon Clark. Shannon Clark was a super high up Canadian prospect. A lot of people had her on the list to kind of be a shoe-in to the UFC, and I believe the odds were super against Eunice Dubin in this fight. I think this was one of the most, like, yeah, she was a plus 450 underdog against Shannon Clark, and she was able to get that knockout in the first round over her. And then Austin Bashi, another one of those performers in week 4 that had a great fight. I think that's another name that you'll possibly be seeing, and he kind of reminds me a little bit. I know he's gotten the Sean O'Malley comparison a lot, but I don't know. He just got that energy that I really truly think he's got a good potential in the UFC, and I think that we'll possibly be seeing him have a very, very successful 2025, especially if he's able to get a matchup here pretty soon. And I mean, Loner Kavanaugh's already getting matchups, so I wouldn't doubt that we see Austin Bashi here pretty soon getting a call. We now look to take it into a couple of weeks later. I always like to kind of go by the weeks here and just really check out the talent that we have on the show. And week 5, I mean, week 5 was a little bit lackluster in terms of, you know, the amount of fights. I feel like it was a little bit of a weaker week, but I really liked Josias Musasa in this one. He did very, very well. I know that it was a split decision, but still looked very, very solid, along with Nicole Kalari getting that armbar submission victory. Just, you know, it's sometimes with these Contender Series fights, I truly do want to see them once they hit that next level. Like, I really want to see how they're going to look on a UFC stage against UFC caliber talent. And that's one of the names that that's why I was going into this next one, Taliesin Teixeira. I am super excited to see what he does at heavyweight, because there's not really a ton of heavyweight prospects right now in terms of Dana White Contender Series guys, or just in general guys that are on the uprise. So Taliesin Teixeira had a very, very strong performance. Really excited to see what he does. I mean, Elijah Smith and Aaron Tao, that was a banger of a matchup. I think Aaron Tao is another one of those guys you may see kind of on that Dana White Contender Series short list to be able to get a call back, possibly, because let me tell you, he had a very, very strong showing against Elijah Smith. I know he wasn't able to earn the win, but that first round looked very, very dangerous, and then Elijah was just able to kind of just go ahead and fundamental, you know, he just had really strong fundamentals in this one, was able to go ahead and get the win. I was really disappointed in this Benjamin Bennett and Joey Hart fight. I feel like, you know, Joey Hart, even though he suffered the loss, I think that's another name that we possibly could be seeing back on Dana White Contender Series, especially with his finishing ability. I think that the UFC really does really love those guys that are able to get those finishes and get guys out of there quick, and Joey Hart is the definition of that, and I think that was a big reason why Benjamin Bennett obviously was not signed on. But I mean, Ahmad Hazanzada, another big win over there, and Dana White Contender Series got the win over Dylan Montello. That was another guy that I really, really was like, we'll see how he does in this one. I know Dylan's a solid competitor as well, and it was a very near even fight. They were going at it in this one. I mean, Montello almost had him. I thought that we were very, very close to seeing Montello get the finish, but Ahmad was able to go ahead and pull out the win, was able to earn that UFC contract, and now we'll possibly look to see him in 2025. But very, very excited to see Loner Kavanaugh take on the likes of Jose Ochoa over there at Macau, China. That's kind of one of the, I mean, we had Cody Haddon recently, but one of the first guys that we're really truly getting to see make that Contender Series jump into the UFC. So very, very excited to get to see his matchup coming forward.